The stadium lights blazed like 1,000 suns, casting long shadows across the field. Marcus Johnson, the star quarterback of Lincoln High, sprinted toward the end zone, the crowd roaring his name. His best friend, Jordan Carter, watched from the sidelines, his heart pounding with pride. Marcus had always been more than a teammate. He was family. The final whistle blew, and Lincoln High secured their victory. The team celebrated, but Jordan noticed Marcus glancing at the stands, his smile faltering. "You good, man?" Jordan asked. Marcus nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Just tired," he muttered. That night, as they drove home, Marcus joked about their future, how he'd make it to the NFL and Jordan would be his manager. But beneath the laughter, there was an unspoken tension, a weight neither of them could name. Hours later, Jordan's phone buzzed with a frantic call. Marcus had been pulled over. By the time Jordan arrived, the scene was chaos. Flashing lights, shouting officers, and Marcus's lifeless body on the pavement. Jordan's world shattered. The boy who had been his brother, his anchor, was gone. And the story the officers told didn't add up. Jordan clenched his fists, tears streaming down his face. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was an injustice. And he wouldn't rest until the truth came out. The next morning, the school was a ghost town. Students huddled in corners, their faces pale with shock. Jordan walked through the halls, his chest heavy with grief. He stopped at Marcus's locker, where someone had taped a photo of him mid-throw, his arm extended like a warrior. Jordan's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and opened the video he'd taken at the scene. The officers' voices were sharp, their commands aggressive. Marcus had been calm, compliant. Jordan's breath hitched as he replayed the moment the shot rang out. That afternoon, Jordan posted a video online with a simple caption. "This is Marcus Johnson. He was unarmed. He was my brother. #Justice for Marcus." The video went viral. Comments flooded in anger, disbelief, and stories of similar tragedies. Jordan's inbox filled with messages from strangers, each one a reminder that Marcus's death was not an isolated incident. That night, Jordan sat in his room, staring at the screen. The movement had begun, but he knew this was only the beginning. The fight for justice would be long, and the cost would be high. But for Marcus, he would burn the world down if he had to. The backlash was swift. By morning, Jordan's video had been shared millions of times, but not everyone was supportive. The local news called it misleading, and the police department issued a statement defending the officers' actions. Jordan's family received threatening calls, and someone threw a brick through their living room window. Jordan's mother begged him to take the video down, her voice trembling with fear. "They'll come for you next," she whispered. But Jordan refused. Marcus's face haunted him, his laughter echoing in his mind. At school, the divide was palpable. Some students wore black armbands in solidarity, while others avoided Jordan's gaze. In the cafeteria, a group of football players confronted him. "You're making us look bad," one sneered. Jordan stood his ground, his voice steady. "Marcus was one of us. If we don't fight for him, who will?" The words hung in the air, but the tension remained. That night, Jordan lay awake, the weight of the world pressing down on him. He thought of Marcus's smile, his dreams, his life cut short. The fight was just beginning, and Jordan knew he couldn't do it alone. The next day, a girl named Aisha approached Jordan after class. She was quiet, someone Jordan had barely noticed before, but her eyes burned with determination. "I want to help," she said, handing him a flyer she designed. It featured Marcus's photo and the hashtag Justice for Marcus. Jordan's heart swelled with gratitude. Aisha had a gift for design, and her passion was contagious. Together, they began organizing a rally, spreading the word through social media. But not everyone was on board. The principal called Jordan into his office, warning him to tone it down. "You're stirring up trouble," he said, his voice cold. Jordan clenched his fists, his voice trembling with anger. Marcus was killed, and no one's doing anything about it. If that's trouble, then so be it. As he left the office, he felt a surge of determination. Aisha was waiting outside, her eyes filled with concern. "We're in this together," she said, squeezing his hand. For the first time since Marcus's death, Jordan felt a flicker of hope. The day of the rally, the park was packed. Hundreds of people gathered, their faces solemn but determined. Jordan stood on the stage, his heart pounding as he looked out the crowd. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice cracking with emotion. Marcus was more than a football player. He was a son, a friend, a brother. He didn't deserve to die. The crowd erupted in applause, their chants of justice for Marcus echoing through the streets. But the celebration was short-lived. As the rally ended, a group of counter-protesters arrived, their signs filled with hate. Jordan's stomach churned as he read the words. Blue lives matter, and don't resist, don't die. Aisha grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. We need to go, she urged. As they left, Jordan glanced back at the crowd, his heart heavy. The fight was far from over, and the road ahead would be fraught with danger. But for Marcus, he would keep going. That night, Jordan's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. Stop while you're ahead. Or else. His hands trembled as he showed the text to Aisha. They're trying to scare us, she said, her voice steady. But Jordan couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The next morning, he found his car vandalized, the words traitor scrawled across the hood. His mother begged him to stop, her eyes filled with tears. I can't lose you too, she whispered. Jordan felt torn, the weight of responsibility crushing him. But as he looked at Marcus's photo, he knew he couldn't back down. I'll be careful, he promised his mother. That afternoon, he and Aisha met with local activists who offered guidance and support. You're not alone, the woman said, her voice firm. This fight is bigger than you. Jordan nodded, his resolve hardening. The threats would only make him stronger. As the movement gained momentum, the police department announced an internal investigation. Jordan was skeptical, but Aisha urged him to stay hopeful. This is progress, she said. They began gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses who had been at the scene. One woman, Ms. Thompson, had seen everything from her porch. Marcus didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice shaking. They just shot him. Jordan's heart ached as he listened to her story. He and Aisha compiled the testimonies, creating a detailed timeline of events. But as they dug deeper, they uncovered unsettling details about the officers involved. One had a history of complaints, but they'd been buried. Jordan felt a surge of anger. The system was broken, and Marcus was just one of many victims. One evening, Jordan received an anonymous email with a link to a hidden file. It contained internal police documents, including reports on Marcus's case. Jordan's hands shook as he read through them. The officers had lied. Marcus had been unarmed, and there was no justification for shooting. Aisha's eyes widened as she read the documents. This is huge, she whispered. They debated what to do, knowing the risks of leaking the information. But Jordan knew they had no choice. The truth needs to come out, he said. The next day, the documents were published online, sparking outrage. The police department was forced to respond, but their excuses rang hollow. Jordan felt a surge of hope. They were one step closer to justice. The leak ignited a firestorm. The police union held a press conference, accusing Jordan of spreading lies. The local news portrayed him as a troublemaker, and the threats against him intensified. Aisha's parents forbade her from seeing him, fearing for her safety. Jordan felt isolated, the weight of the world pressing down on him. But he refused to give up. He began working with a lawyer, who helped him navigate the legal battle. This won't be easy, the lawyer warned. But you're doing the right thing. Jordan nodded, his resolve unwavering. For Marcus, he would fight until the end. Months passed, and the investigation dragged on. But then, a breakthrough, a whistleblower within the police department came forward, corroborating the leaked documents. The officers involved were suspended, and the case gained national attention. Jordan felt a surge of hope, but he knew the fight was far from over. As he stood before a crowd of supporters, his voice trembled with emotion. This is for Marcus, he said, and for everyone who's been silenced. The crowd erupted in applause, their chants of justice for Marcus echoing through the streets. Jordan felt a flicker of hope. They were one step closer to justice. The trial was a media circus. Jordan sat in the courtroom, his heart pounding as the evidence was presented. The officers' defense was weak, their lies unraveling under scrutiny. But the verdict was far from certain. As the jury deliberated, Jordan felt a surge of anxiety. He thought of Marcus's smile, his dreams, his life cut short. When the verdict was finally read, guilty, Jordan felt a wave of relief. But the fight was far from over. The verdict was a victory, but the backlash was fierce. The officers' supporters protested, and Jordan's family faced renewed threats. But Jordan refused to back down. He and Aisha continued their work, fighting for systemic change. As he stood before a crowd of supporters, Jordan felt a surge of hope. This is just the beginning, he said. The movement grew, spreading to other cities. Jordan and Aisha traveled the country, sharing Marcus's story and advocating for change. But the road was long and the challenges were immense. As the movement gained momentum, The threats intensified. Jordan's family was forced to move, and Aisha's safety was constantly at risk. But they refused to back down. One night, as Jordan lay in bed, he received a chilling message. "You're next." His heart pounded, but he knew he couldn't stop. For Marcus, he would keep fighting. Months later, the movement achieved a major victory. A new law was passed, holding police accountable for their actions. Jordan felt a surge of pride, but he knew the fight was far from over. Years passed, and the movement continued to grow. Marcus's legacy lived on, inspiring a new generation of activists. Jordan and Aisha remained at the forefront, their bond stronger than ever. One evening, Jordan visited Marcus's grave. He placed a football on a headstone, his heart heavy with grief. "I miss you, man," he whispered. As he walked away, he felt a surge of determination. Marcus's death had sparked a movement, but the fight was far from over. For Marcus, he would keep going. Jordan and Aisha continued their work, fighting for systemic change. They knew the road ahead would be long, but they were determined to make a difference. As they stood before a crowd of supporters, Jordan felt a surge of hope. "This is just the beginning," he said. Years later, Jordan looked back on the journey with pride. The movement had achieved so much, but there was still work to be done.